Greg, we really appreciate all the time that you and your team have put together. They've been working nonstop for the last several weeks to get the conference organized and give support to this, so that was great. The next person that I get the pleasure of introducing is someone who came onto my radar approximately 17 years ago. So I got a phone call from a person who was running part of Electronic Arts in Australia, Nigel Sandiford, and he said to me, "We have a rock star who needs to come and spend time in Vancouver and will one day end up being a leader or the leader of the company. And you need to spend time with this guy because he is the real deal." So that was Andrew Wilson. So Andrew came, spent 5 years here in Vancouver, later moved to Redwood Shores, and has worked his way up through Electronic Arts to be named CEO in September of 2013. So that's a pretty great story and a pretty great tie to our local community. Beyond that, in the past couple of years, Andrew has been resetting the strategy for the company, building plans for growth and excellence in its products, in the culture of the business, and has been recognized as the #3 CEO in North America by Fortune magazine last year. So Andrew, that's a great start. If you can come up. I know that Andrew is also going to set on his personal OKRs how to get to #1 in 2016. So if you could share your thoughts on that, and it's really wonderful to have you here. Let's give it up for Andrew.
Thanks, Don. Appreciate it. And it's true, I got to grow up in a company at the time that Don was a tremendous leader and running our worldwide studios, and learned a lot from him over the years, and appreciate everything, Don. Thank you. So good morning. They asked me to come and talk to you a little bit about digital transformation. So I get the fortune of talking to lots of folks about this. I now have the benefit of living in Silicon Valley, and everyone's talking about digital down there. And the first thing that people tell me is, we're good. Digital has opened up the world. Opportunity is everywhere. I now have full access to the entire globe because of digital. Like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so the math is pretty simple. There's 7 billion people on the planet. I now have digital in my back pocket. So if all I've got to do is get $1 from every one of them, and we're good. And let me tell you, there are companies raising capital every day in the Valley on that premise alone. So I'm going to get an app, and everyone's got a mobile phone, and more people every day get mobile phones. In fact, some people have 3 mobile phones, so I'll get $3 from them, and everything's going to be good. Well, not so fast. So right now, 2.6 billion people have mobile phones, and smartphones, to be precise. And, well, that's still a pretty good number. So I don't have the 7, but I've got 2.6 billion. I can still make some money out of 2.6 billion. But here's the thing. People are spending 162 minutes a day. And so you're like, wow. Okay, so I don't have the 7 billion, I got 2.6 billion, but they're spending nearly 3 hours a day. I don't have to get much of that time to make some money. I mean, they can do a transaction with me through my app super fast. I'm golden. But as we start to dig into the numbers a little bit, here's what we come to realize. Only 138 minutes of those are spent in apps. Go figure, people actually use their phone to make telephone calls. So 138 minutes in apps, we're still good. Over 2 hours of time that can be used in my app giving my company money. Digital transformation, here we come. But only 116 minutes, of that 138, 116 minutes is spent in native apps. So that's kind of, web search, that's mail, that's the things that come with a phone. Now all of a sudden, we don't have that much time left. 22 minutes a day spent in non-native apps on smartphones, on average. So all of a sudden, we went from this premise that was 7 billion people, and all I've got to do is get $1, to 2.6 billion people, but I had 3 hours of their time on a daily basis to work with, to now I'm fighting for some part of 22 minutes. But that's okay. I can do a lot in 22 minutes. Challenge is, most people have an average of 26 non-native apps on their phone. So now things are starting to get a little hairy. Now my premise of why I'm going to raise venture capital is starting to get a little shaky, because now I'm fighting with 26 other apps on a day-to-day basis for 22 minutes. And it's even more challenging. There's 1.9 billion apps on the App Store, 1.9 million apps on the App Store right now. And there's 1,000 new apps added every day. In fact, there's going to be like 20 or 30 apps added to the App Store while I'm standing here. Anyone's app going up this morning? Anything happening? So what that kind of brings us to is we as commercial entities are fighting with 1.9 million people or 1.9 million commercial enterprises for 1 minute a day. 26 apps, 22 minutes, less than 1 minute a day. So all of a sudden, this whole new open world of digital, this world of opportunity, this world where I get to connect with the entire planet, started to get very narrow. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we think about that as a company and how we're working through this digital transformation. Before I do, this is our campus here in Burnaby. Has anyone been to our campus in Burnaby? We've got a few. Okay, that's great. It's a fantastic campus. As Don said, I arrived there in 2004. I was there till mid-2009 before I moved down to the Bay Area where our headquarters is. Amazing things happen here. I grew up in this studio is what I tell people a lot. I'd been in business before then, I'd been in business after then, but these were my formative years. This studio is at the pointy end of electronic arts' digital transformation. We have about 2,000 people that go to work there every day. We make games, services, products, websites, apps that service the world. Out of this studio, a product called FIFA comes out, which is the world's largest sports video game. It's the largest video game in Europe, and on any given year, given its return, which is well over $1 billion annually, makes it one of the world's largest entertainment properties. But it's not just console, it's mobile. It's global on mobile. It's not just mobile, it's PC free-to-play. It's one of the top games in Korea, it's one of the top games in China, and other things like UFC and Plants vs. Zombies and hockey and Need for Speed. Some of the world's biggest things have come here, and it's because these amazing group of 2,000 people who come to work every day here in BC are at the pointy end of driving this digital transformation, of moving us from being a company that puts code on shiny disks in boxes as a product driving for a single transaction to the provision of live services to a global community of hundreds of millions of people. So, digital transformation, how should we think about that? Not too long ago, if I wanted to get here to this conference, I would have stood out in the corner with my thumb out and hailed a cab. Now, if it's raining, I get wet. If the cab's dirty, doesn't matter. I mean, that's my only choice to get here. If I wanted to connect with any one of you, I had to actually pick up the phone and call you. If I wanted to go shopping, I thought about it all week, and then I went down to the mall on the weekend. And if I wanted to actually come and stay here and get a hotel, I would either go to a travel agent, or I'd call a travel agent, or call a hotel and say, hey, I need to find some accommodation. In today's day and age, there are companies fundamentally disrupting every element of our daily lives. Uber now has fundamentally changed how we think about transport. Facebook has fundamentally changed how we think about connecting with our friends and family. Amazon has absolutely changed how we shop. And Airbnb means I don't have to stay in hotels everywhere I go anymore. When I travel with my family, I can go to a website, I can go to an app, and I can find a home for my family to stay in. Every one of these companies are thinking about disruption. They're thinking about, how do I remove the frustrations of life? How do I get to a point where I don't have to stand out in the rain with my thumb out? How do I get to a point where when I get in the cab, I know it's clean because everyone before me has made sure of that through the rating system that goes through the app? What are the added services I get? What's the water? What's the mints that come when I get into an Uber cab? So every one of these entities are thinking on three vectors. How do I remove frustrations? How do I enhance service? And how do I add new services to fundamentally change how we live our daily lives? We've been working through this same puzzle. There was a time where if you wanted to play a video game, you'd go and you'd get it and you'd put the cartridge into the machine and you would sit and you were bound by the four walls in your living room or the four walls in your bedroom in terms of how you played, what you played, and who you played with. very quickly, the world started to move online. And we got to a point where you were no longer bound by the four walls anymore, but you could now play with hundreds of millions of people around the world. But it was always in these one-to-one interactions. I could get online, I could find one other person, I could connect with that person, I could play a game with them. Well, now there's a world where I get online and I play in a fully networked ecosystem, where I connect with groups of like-minded people, where I play games that are viewed by tens or hundreds of thousands of people. What you're seeing here is our FIFA Online, our Asian Cup property. 48,000 people come together to play, but that's not what it's all about. They have built up their skills through playing with other friends online, participating in a digital ecosystem, playing the game over and over again, ultimately culminating in making it this final event that's broadcast across 6 countries. It's a pretty spectacular change in terms of how people play and enjoy interactive entertainment. So what is this digital transformation? How should we think about it? I talk to a lot of people and they say, well, it's really simple. It's about selling stuff through digital channels. I sell my stuff on Amazon, so I'm a digital company. Well, that's part of it, but it's not all of it. Other people say, well, it's about selling digital things. You know, the fastest growing category in the video game sector is extra content, digital collectibles or digital enhancements for the games that you've bought. But it's not just about selling digital things. It's about a fundamental shift in how you operate your business. And it's really about 3 core pillars. It's about the utilization of technology. For the longest time, the entire energy that we've applied to the things that we do as commercial enterprise has been human-led. It's been people-led. And it's not to say that people are going away because, you know, hey, I'm a person too. But it's about the utilization of technology in combination with the skill sets and the creativity of people to fundamentally shift your business. It's about moving from intuition, where we all spend a lot of time guessing what's going to happen in the marketplace or guessing what our consumers are doing, and using data to tell us. And it's about moving from that drive for a single transaction or a single connection to the provision of service. So humans to humans plus technology. Intuition to data. Product or transaction to service. So this disruption that we talk about, I mean, there's probably not a tech conference on the planet going on where this doesn't come up on one of the slides somewhere or in multiple places. How do we disrupt? How do we fundamentally change the way people experience life? And how should we think about disruption? Well, in our world, it's pretty simple. We're trying to disrupt on 3 vectors: discovery, purchase, and enjoyment. How do people find the things that we want them to find? Or more importantly, how do things find the things that they want to find? How do they buy them? And then how do they enjoy them? So short example, simple example. I have a 3.5-year-old girl and I have an 8-month boy. Love my kids. But anyone who has little kids knows that it means I haven't been to the cinema for 4 years. I don't even know how to get to the cinema anymore. And let me tell you, a lot has changed since the last time I went to the cinema. So the world where I used to go and line up, and again, I remember lining up when the 4th Star Wars film came out here in BC. I stood out in the rain at midnight to go and see it up on Granville Street. Not this time. So this Star Wars comes out, and I said to my wife, wouldn't it be cool if we could go and do this? She goes, yeah. Do you even know where a cinema is? I said, actually, I don't. So I get online, I find the Fandango app. And I go through, and the Fandango app immediately helps me find not just the movie I want to watch, but the cinema I want to watch it at. Now, I enter my details, and I buy my movie tickets. Not only do I buy them, but I can now reserve seats at movies. It's quite a novelty, let me tell you. So I went through this whole experience, discover, found the content, found the cinema, bought it, got the tickets, turned up at the movie cinema, showed my mobile phone, and walked in and sat at my seat and had someone bring me popcorn. It's a pretty spectacular shift in terms of how we enjoy movies. And pretty much every company that is disrupting in a meaningful way is disrupting on these 3 vectors. So, you've figured out that your app is going to be fighting for a minute of time. We know that to be true. So you can do all of these things. You can think about disruption. You can go after discovery, purchase, enjoyment. You can do all things right, but we still got this problem of all these people trying to do exactly the same thing. All these people trying to do exactly what we're doing in our business, the things that we've been doing for 30 years. And for us in the video game business, let me tell you, there are 4 guys and girls in garages everywhere raising venture capital trying to take on Electronic Arts, trying to launch an app that will do better than FIFA or Need for Speed or Madden or Battlefield. So how do we think about that? There is a path through it. There are all these companies who are thinking about this differently. Netflix, Hulu, HBO, Amazon, Bank of America. There are all these companies who are thinking about this disruption, not just in terms of how do I get the technology to deliver a difference in experience of discovery, purchase, and enjoyment. They're thinking about it in terms of relationships. Who's married? A bunch. Who's in a significant relationship? We as human beings have a propensity to get into relationships. We just do. We're relationship-oriented people. The good news about this is that also we'll put up with a bunch of crap inside of relationships before we get out. It's how, because being in one and the warmth and good feeling and sense of belonging that you get as a result of being in a relationship is better than going out and trying to find a new one. But even this is challenged. Because as human beings, beyond our personal relationships, the relationships we have with commercial enterprise, we're kind of limited. So on average, human beings can have 5 to 7 commercial relationships of meaning. And so these are 6 of mine, right? So although the Amazon is really my wife's, we have boxes arrive every day on a fairly regular basis. My life now is packing and unpacking boxes and getting them into recycling. But these things have changed our life. Whether it's a surf report, whether it's Spotify, how Spotify's fundamentally changed how I listen to music, or Walking Dead's changed how I watch film, or Strava has changed how I train and compete with my friends. United is a great example of a relationship that's absolutely not perfect. Anyone flown United? All right, so here's the deal. The food is not really edible. I would advise against it. But for the most part, they get me to where I want to go, and they're very nice to me because I spend a lot of time on their planes, and they say, "Good morning, Mr. Wilson, here's a seat for you," and I get a nice seat, and it's comfortable, I get a cup of coffee, and I end up generally at the place I was hoping to end up at when I got on the plane. And all these other things that happen that aren't perfect, I put up with those in the context of the relationship because there are good things that come by virtue of me continuing to fly in their planes. And as we think about relationships, it's always an understanding that relationships are never perfect. And that as corporate enterprises, we're never going to get it always right with our customers. But our job is to always listen to them and understand that relationships are two-way, and that where things go wrong, we do our best to try and fix them. So what are the components of a relationship? There's a whole bunch of companies out there who think the most important part of a relationship is the connection between the consumer and your brand, or the consumer and your company. And that's part of it. But let me tell you, the consumer themselves, that's not the first thing they think about. The first thing consumers think about is, in this social world that we now live in, is who else am I connecting with in the context of this relationship? What experiences or products or services or content am I connecting with in the context of this relationship? And then ultimately, if we end up with connection to the brand, that's okay. So connection to people. This world of Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat and social networks, this connection to people is really important. And understanding that in the context of relationships, our consumers, or in our case, our players, actually care a lot more about the people that they're connected with and the relationships they have with the people in the context of what they do with us is really important. Robin Dunbar, who did a study in the early 90s, and there's a lot of different evidence and different studies around people and relationships, but this is one thing, and we use it a lot, and it works for us. What Dunbar did was studied 38 primates and come to understand that the peak number, by virtue of some extrapolation of primate brain size and human brain size, the maximum number of people that you could hold in a meaningful personal relationship was 150. And after 150, you would separate. But even at 150, about 40% of time had to be spent in care and feeding. Now, the optimum number for the deepest personal relationship that requires no time for care and feeding, but generally co-location, is about 7. So as we think about driving personal relationships, as we think about building relationships with our consumers, we're thinking on those two ends of the spectrum. How do we make sure you have 7 really good friends? Because if you have 7 really good friends in the context of what you do with us, you're more likely to stay doing what you do with us. And every friend less than 7 that you have, you are disproportionately more likely to churn out of the system. So if we see people with 6 friends, we go and spend time and try and get them to have more friends. Conversely, as groups get bigger and bigger, we understand that we have to apply a lot of energy, effectively 40% of our energy, to care and feeding of that community, to give them reasons to connect. So things like our game Battlefield 4, we run live events. These are big communities. We run live events, we run special reward schemes for them. We run reasons for them to connect. We find like-minded people or like-playing people, and we put them together. And years after launch, Battlefield 4 still has millions and millions and millions of people playing the game every month. And it isn't about a connection to us. It's about a connection to the other people that they play with. And we've managed to keep them in our ecosystem and work with them and give them meaningful experiences, but not just meaningful experiences with us, but meaningful experiences with their friends. The connection to content is also a really important one. Long before they ever think about you as a company or you as a brand or you as a corporate enterprise, they're thinking about the content and the service that you provide. And understanding how people connect with your content is really important. Anyone a House of Cards fan? Okay, so Netflix did a very interesting study. What they figured out was that in their shows, basically they had 3 episodes to connect with the viewership in order for them to go into that binge watching mode that we all do with Netflix shows. And what they realized with House of Cards, with that first season, was that you saw 3 different phases of Frank Underwood in the 3 episodes. You saw the ruthless Frank, you saw the politician Frank, but what they realized as they went back and looked at this was that really didn't capture a lot of people. A lot of people didn't identify with Frank in those first 2 episodes around Frank the ruthless guy and Frank the politician. So in episode 3, if you remember, he goes back to Gaffney and helps the local community, and all of a sudden you see a human side of Frank. And that was the moment. That was the moment they captured the audience and they moved into this phase of binge watching, and the rest is history. We've all now been hankering to watch every new season of House of Cards. So the connection with your content, understanding and using the data that you get out of the ecosystem to really pinpoint how different cohorts in your player base or different cohorts in your consumer base are going to engage with your content and connect and then ultimately stay with it is really, really important. We're doing the same thing. We have a thing called EA Access on Xbox One. The first time we offered a subscription to all of our content. What we come to understand was that when people play 3 games, they stay in the ecosystem. So for everyone who plays 2, you might understand, we spend a lot of energy trying to get them to play a 3rd, because once they've played 3, they're likely to stay. We also know that if they play 10 sessions a month, they're likely to stay. So we spend a lot of energy around people who are playing 7 or 8 sessions a month, trying to help them and encourage them to connect with their friends and play more. And it's changing the way we run our business. No longer do we just launch a game and hope for the best. We launch a game, the game goes live, and we spend then a great deal of energy with the data we get out of the system to provide a service that ultimately results in a long-term relationship with our player base. Connection to the brand. This is the 3rd of 4. It is actually important. It's not that consumers don't have brand affinity, it's just that it's not the first thing they think about. So once you get to a point where they are connecting with a community of friends, 7 to 150, once you get to a point where they are deeply engaged in the content, then it's really important they feel good about the brand they're spending so much of their time with. And Starbucks does a great job of this. I think it's one of the great examples of brand recognition. I once heard a quote from Howard Schultz that said, "They are not a coffee shop that serves people. They're a people company that serves coffee." And it comes through in everything they do. It's a fundamentally different way of thinking about their business. And so as you think about this and you try and you build a brand that people want to connect with, think about going beyond just the provision of the product that you have, and think about the fulfillment of needs and motivations that your consumer base, your player base, your viewership, your readership has when they come and interact with you. And what else might you do, given the data you have, to remove frustrations, enhance their life, or provide them new services? Again, this concept of EA Access where we have a subscription, where we start to build brand affinity, not just with FIFA and Need for Speed and The Sims, but we start to give people an understanding that EA as an entity, and if you understand the video game business, EA for many is this corporate beast who just wants to take money from them while people are playing our games. And what we're trying to do very deliberately and very directed is reinvigorate us. That's not actually what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is provide valuable services, valuable ways to connect with our experiences. Things like EA Access, a service that we launched on Xbox One, and recently a similar service on our Origin PC platform that lets you play an entire catalog of games for $5 a month. The best possible value that you can ever imagine. Now, the good news for that is that in the world we live in today, in this digital age, human beings invest dollars after time versus the other way around. For the longest time in civilization, we would spend money as human beings, and then we would spend our time where we spent our money. That was kind of how it worked. Once you had the money, you inevitably had the time. Well, it's actually reversed now. Human beings spend time doing things and then ultimately spend money where they spend their time. Think about how you engage with Amazon. Think about how you engage with Facebook. Think about how you engage with a service like EA Access. You come in and you play a bunch of games, and then ultimately you invest after that. That digital transformation has shifted the order and the value proposition that we place on time versus dollars. And lastly, so connection to each other, connection to content, connection to the brand. Lastly, the importance here of relationships is you've got to be everywhere they are. You have to be. And I put a bank up here because I think that most of us would say, well, banks are the ones that surely are trailing the digital transformation. But in fact, they're pushing the boundaries. They are everywhere we are. No longer do I just have to go to a bank. No longer do I just have to go to an ATM. No longer do I have to pick up the phone. Now it's with me everywhere on my phone, and I can do amazing things with my banking apps. I can cash checks, I can deposit checks, I can put holds on my credit cards while I've lost my wallet yet again because my 3-year-old likes to hide it. There's two fundamental reasons why being everywhere your consumer is important. One is, remember that thing about heightened competition? If you are not, someone else will be. It's that simple. Every moment that you are not there for them, in this two-way relationship, listening to what they need and endeavoring to fulfill those needs and motivations, someone else will be trying. And the second is that the refresh rate on devices now, refresh rate on technology, isn't 4 or 5 years like a TV. It's 6 months of a cell phone, and changing rapidly. So if your connection point is only through one device or one mechanism, given the refresh rate, there is a chance that as they switch, the relationship with you is lost. And so as you think about building the connection to each other, the connection to content, and the connection to your brand, think about it in a way that is omnipresent. Think about how you can solve for the heightened competition. Think about how you can solve for the fact that disconnects in the relationship are bad things. So, a few key takeaways. In this digital transformation, the world is open to us. It's wonderful. Anything is possible. I get up in a place where anything is possible. People every day are thinking up new ways to remove frustrations, enhance our life, and provide new services. But we're fighting for a minute of time, or less. Think about the fact that digital transformation isn't selling analog things through digital channels, and it's not selling digital things. It's about the move from human-led to human plus tech. It's about the move from intuition to data, and it's about the move from product to service. And in a world where you're fighting for that 1 minute of time, in a world where you've figured out the disruption, the only surefire way in a world where we as human beings can only maintain somewhere between 5 and 7 commercial relationships, the relationship that you have with your consumer is the most important thing. Connecting them with their friends in the context of what they do with you. Connecting them with the content, the services, the experiences that you provide to them. Connecting them ultimately with your brand so they feel good about the relationship they have. And then ultimately being everywhere they are so that that connection can never be disrupted. Thank you very much for your time. Again, time is our most valuable commodity. I'm deeply appreciative that you came by this morning. I hope you have a great show.
Andrew, thank you. That was great. Before you leave, 2 impromptu questions.
Yes.
One, you've got the ear of people here in BC.
Yep.
What would you like to see more of from our community to help support electronic arts?
Listen, first, the BC community has been tremendously supportive of electronic arts. For the longest time when I lived here, people believed that electronic arts was based in Vancouver, which is spectacular. Again, we have the best part of 2,000 people that come to work here every day. The things that we need is schooling, education. We are fighting for talent more than we ever have before. This thing I talk about, relationships, interactivity, now everyone is doing it. There was a time where we were the sole people doing this thing called interactive entertainment. Now if you buy, sell, trade, watch, view, everyone is trying to make the interactivity. Everyone is trying to build relationships. We have a fight for talent. I'd love to see BC attract more and more talent here. That comes from education, that comes from the ability to come here and do wonderful things, and do things at scale. The reality is it's awesome to start new things, but you need that balance in the ecosystem of scale plus new in order to truly flourish.
That's pretty great. Second question, just managing platform partners, and if you were at home and you had a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox One, and you could only pick one device to play, do you have any particular bias?
That's like saying who is my favorite child. I get shot if I say things like that. I play both. Both have great content, and I play both.
That's a skilled public company CEO right there. Let's give it up for Andrew.
Thanks, man.
Go ahead, after you.